Hello and welcome to And Did Those Feet, the podcast that celebrates 25 years of English football from 1945 to 1970. And I'm joined as ever by Karl Ramsey. Hello, Karl.
Hi, Peter.
Karl, last week we talked a bit about Bobby Charlton, about the first half of his career, really
Yeah,
right through to 1963. And actually, if you take the 10 years that divide 1958, the Munich air crash from 1968, and the European Cup, you arrive at 1963. And I think 63 is quite an important year. I don't know if you agree with me, because it's sort of rather obscure in the Manchester United annals, but it's a turning point, isn't it?
I think it is. I think it's a really key season. And I'd say for two reasons. One reason is because they won the FA Cup, and that was a bigger deal then, as we've discussed many times, than it would be today.
And it's
And
their first trophy since 57. It's been
that's
a
right.
long wait.
Yes. And so arguably that gave confidence, etc., that saw them go on and achieve a lot more as the 60s went on. But possibly the most significant thing about 1963 wasn't winning the FA Cup, but avoiding relegation because it was a close run thing.
It was a very close run thing. I,
And of
I,
course, if
I,
it had known, that certainly would have made it a lot more difficult to bounce back to win league titles, never mind the European Cup.
well, if you think that the following season they finished second in the first division, none of that would have happened if they'd gone down, and they very nearly did. I did look at the fixture list for the sort of sequence of scores over the 62-3 season. They lost 9 of their first 14 matches
Hmm.
and 5 of the last 10. I mean, they were really asking for it, and they finished, as you say, 19th. I think Man
Yeah.
City went down, didn't they? Man City went down as bottom club, I think.
Man City went down. So in those days, it was two down,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
and United
Orient.
finished 19th.
Yeah.
Uh, Birmingham were below them and stayed up, I
Right.
think.
Yes.
But it was very, very close. United easily could have gone down that season. And it was a bizarre season because of the big freeze.
Of course. Of course. Yes.
I think there was some bizarre thing. I'm not sure United actually played a league game in January because it
No,
was
that's
so.
interesting. Yeah.
Uh, and it was a year where the third round of the FA Cup wasn't completed until the second week in March,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and the FA Cup ended up being played 3 weeks later than it was originally going to be.
Yes.
So,
It was June, wasn't it? I think.
sorry, played 3 weeks later than it was originally going to be. So it was a bit of a crazy season,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but
And
it
they,
could a disastrous one for United, but ended
yeah.
up bringing up that trophy.
Well, it did, and they played Leicester in the final. Of course, Leicester were quite a big gun in those days. I mean, they had been hanging around the top five for the last sort of 3 or 4 years. They had some very good players, a young goalkeeper in Gordon Banks, who we're going to hear more of. Frank McClintock, I think, played in that game.
Yes.
It was an accomplished and practiced side, Leicester. So Manchester United did very well to win that. And it's where it all begins, isn't it? Because actually, in the autumn there's a new arrival in the team. Do we know who that is?
Yes, a youngster from Northern Ireland called George Best came into the side.
Who immediately makes an impact. And Dennis Law has 30 goals in the next season. Charlton switches to deep lying centre forward. So up until this point, Charlton has, we've said this before, has been playing on the left and
Right.
Johnny Giles on the right. And there's an odd mix of players who are going through the middle. Albert Quixall, for example, is still around.
That's
Um,
right.
although I think his days are numbered.
Hmm.
And so Charlton is brought back to this sort of attacking midfield, essentially. And Law is paired with the player I would regard as one of the most underestimated players in the 1960s, and that's a Manchester United forward who regularly scores a lot of goals, but is
Oh,
not very often thought of. Who am I talking about?
I think of David Hurd.
I am talking about David Hurd, who's, I say, along with Joe Baker, is two of the most underrated players in the 1960s. Joe Baker's a very good player as well. I mean, there are plenty of forwards who don't quite make the cut with Alf Ramsey, but David Hurd is Scottish and always scored plenty of goals. For Arsenal, he got nearly 100 goals in the league. For Manchester United, he got more than that. He got 100 and some
Hmm.
at a rate of one every other game. So the team is coming together anyway. This is the point. And this first little foray into Europe as well since Munich with the Cup Winners' Cup.
Mm.
They reach the last eight. They get actually thrashed by Sporting Lisbon in the last eight, but it's all grist to the mill because from now on they're going to play in Europe pretty much every year, and they're going to progress. Well, to the closing stages, time and again. Is how Manchester United changed then with Charlton moving to deep lying centre forward
I
from
think,
left wing?
yeah, I suspect it knitted the team together. So the team that nearly went down, I think it was pretty ridiculous that that side was in a relegation battle. I mean, that's what the Leicester players were saying after the cup final. There's no way that this side should have been in a relegation fight, and they shouldn't have been. But maybe a reason for it was that Charlton was peripheral by playing on the wing. Once you got then massive changes because he came into the middle. That knitted the side together. As you say, there was best. Law actually had still managed to have a good season in even in 62, 63 when they'd nearly gone down. But he became even better. In 64, he won the European Player of the Year.
Yeah,
Uh, Paddy Crerand, I think, settled in, and there were people who said in the 60s when Crerand plays well, United play well.
right.
He again was a player that I think tactically was very important. The side he made the side tick to a certain degree. So really you've got Crerand and Charlton working together. Um, you might say midfield, and you've got them forwards like you mentioned Hurd, but Law especially, and the addition of Best to bring a bit of magic, and suddenly you've got a struggling side looking fantastic and being in contention for the league.
Actually, they've also got a winger who is one of those unusual players because he wins the league with two different clubs. Very first division with playing for two different clubs. It's quite an impressive achievement. It doesn't happen very often. There aren't that many players who do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Who am I talking about?
Are you thinking of John Kennelly?
Yes, and if you think of this team this forward line that emerges now, you've got a really, I mean, quite conventional sort of arrangement in many ways. You've got two fullbacks in Brennan and Dunn starting to solidify their. Bill Folkes is a sort of Herbert Chapman-esque centre back, centre half. You've got two midfielders in Stiles and Crerand, two wingers in Best and Connelly, a
Yeah.
deep lying centre forward, and then two big strikers or two potent strikers in Law and Hurd. And what strikes me about that is it's quite a conventional setup. And of course, this is a reminder about that of Sir Matt Busby's possible shortcomings as a coach, that he wasn't really an innovative coach, was he? And
No, I don't think so.
I mean, he did pretty well to move Charlton back to the centre of the pitch where his long passing and explosive shot was going to be a bit more effective. But
But then I think is there the question of which manager tactically had the bigger influence on Charlton,
yeah,
and was it more to do with Ramsey than Busby?
yeah, yeah,
I don't know, but I
no,
think possibly it was Ramsey who tactically had more impact on him. Because you're right, Busby, I, I'm always going to say Busby was a great manager. I don't think there's any doubt at all because he was such a good leader. He was inspirational. He insisted on this wonderful attacking football. But I think you get some managers whose great strength is by being tactically innovative, and others not. I mean, I don't, by way of comparison, I don't think Alec Ferguson was the greatest tactical innovator. Um, and Busby certainly wasn't. Uh, but he was still a great manager.
a great manager. He assembled a great team, and anyone who can put out a side like, well, containing three Ballon d'Or winners, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, however he comes by those players, they're playing for him, and of course they're playing for Bobby Charlton. Now, Bobby Charlton has an odd sort of status, I think, in terms of popularity. We might just say take a moment to think about this. Popularity with other players. Isn't it an odd story that he's one of the most popular men in the England team, and it's telling that when the England players want Alf to agree to something, they ask Bob to do the difficult
Yes.
job. Alf doesn't accede to their request. Can they not wear these heavy flannel suits in midsummer? Alf says no, you carry on as you are. But 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 at the same time, there was a certain amount of animosity towards Charlton in the Old Trafford dressing room, wasn't there?
I
Probably
think
not
there was.
this early, but yes. What's that about?
I don't think he was best mates with people like Crerand and Law. Uh, I mean, I remember. I mean, it's quite a long time ago now, but long after Bobby Charlton had retired, Paddy Crerand came to the local football club, Hyde United, near where I come from, to
Right.
do a speech of sorts.
Yeah.
It was very funny.
Yeah.
One of the things, and it grated with me, was he talked about Charlton and he said, Bobby, first thing he did in the morning was get up, go to the bathroom, smile in the mirror, just to get it over with for the day.
Yes.
That
Terrible.
was his take on Charlton. He made it perfectly clear he wasn't much of a fan of him. Now,
Yeah.
I I'm not holding any store and saying Paddy Crerand was right but I think it showed that yeah, he wasn't these weren't necessarily big mates by any stretch of the
I
imagination.
think Jonathan Wilson's book.
The world of Law and Best.
Yes. Yes, quite. I mean, that the best was another story altogether.
Yeah,
Throwing
yeah,
darts at a picture of Bobby Charlton and so forth. Paddy Crerand seems to have, according to Jonathan Wilson's book, seems to have just called Bobby Charlton the bastard, um,
right.
to have
Yeah,
known him in those terms. So it's
yeah.
extraordinary to have had such a divided dressing room. The other thing is that because Charlton was, I think, by any standards, a modest man, a humble man, the
Mm,
humble, especially about his own talent, which of course was prodigious.
mm.
Um, he comes across to an outsider like me as being very likable, or at least
Absolutely.
impossible to dislike.
Yes.
Yet it's a curious thing because I think as well, if you think of his can we call it a feud with Jack Charlton? We're just talking a little bit about his personality here, but his feud with Jack Charlton is very odd, isn't it, really?
It
Because
is. It
Jack
is.
seems to really be a reluctant participant in this. For example, I'm thinking, Jack still hands over the lifetime award from BBC Personality of the Year. If you remember
I
that
do. Very.
episode, was he the Sportsman of the Century or something? And Jack hands over the bauble
Mm,
and makes a very nice, pretty speech about
mm.
Bobby. But Bobby seems to have been behind that division. Bobby would apparently go to Ashington but not visit the mother and so on, which is
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things. I think to make a judgment on who's right and who's wrong in a family thing is very difficult because
yes,
it's one interpretation of it was that it was a falling out really between Bobby's mum and Bobby's wife,
yes,
and that Bobby's attitude was, well, no, I'm not going to come up and see if I can't bring my wife.
right. And was she banned?
I don't know. That's the impression that I get that she didn't want to see that Sissy didn't want to see it was Jean, wasn't it? Bobby's
Norma.
Norma, sorry. Uh Sissy didn't want to see Norma. Oh, I mean, of course, I don't know, but that seems to have been what was going on, is that was the falling out. And I think Jackie's interpretation was, well, Bobby, you don't have to like the fact that they've fallen out, but you can still go and see mum.
Yes,
Whereas Bobby had an intense loyalty to
yes, he
his.
did. Oh well, if ever a man was happily married.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, who knows? I mean, I'll admit to being biased and think
Yes, the world of him. Quite
Bobby's
understandable.
going to be the one in the right.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
but who knows
No,
really?
indeed. Yeah.
But it is sad, especially when you think because you, I mean, I remember the story of Leeds beating Manchester United in the semi-final in 1965. And at the end of the game, Jack Charlton was
Yes.
told that he'd been called up into the
Mm,
England.
mm,
What did he want to do?
mm,
Go into the United dressing room
mm.
and tell his brother. And uh, Jack Charlton paid scant regard to the fact that the Manchester United players are head in hand because they've just lost an FA Cup
Yes. Yes.
semi-final. Maybe not the most tactful of men, but wanted to share that with Bobby. And I think Jack was told basically, Jack, great,
Leave the
well done.
room,
Yes.
as it were, in the vernacular, vacate the premises. It's an
Yes.
interesting period because Manchester United at this point are just inching towards their goal. They reached the European Cup last for the get the semi-final in '66, this
Yes.
golden year, and get beaten by, of all people, Partizan Belgrade. But it does include a real statement when they beat Real Madrid in the last eight, doesn't it? I think that's a sort of critical moment. And
I think that yeah, I think that the really famous game in that 65-66 season was when they beat Benfica in the quarterfinal in second leg in Lisbon.
right, yes,
So it had been a very tight game at Old Trafford, and they went to the second leg. And I think famously Matt Busby had told them to keep it tight for the first 20 minutes,
yeah,
and United then, to be fair, best in particular,
yeah,
riot. And this Benfica side, who were regarded as close to invincible at home, certainly they hadn't lost in Europe at home since I don't know when. And United beat them 5-1. And that became the fifth Beatle thing with George
of
with
course, yeah.
uh, and so I think it was a real turn up when they then lost the semi-final to Partizan. So that was I think was a huge high followed by a big disappointment.
You know, Bobby Charlton played in five European Cup semi-finals and won only one of them.
Yes,
He
yeah,
played in
yeah.
57, 58, 66,
That's
68, the one he wins, and
yeah.
60. So 68 is the semi-final. That's the Real Madrid, isn't it?
That's the semi-final was against Real Madrid, yeah.
That's right. And then 69, of course, he loses to
Milan.
Milan. Yeah,
Yeah. A very tight semi-final where
yeah,
there was a disputed a goal was given reeled out for offside, which might have taken it into extra time, which
yes,
was. But you're right, yeah. United's record in semi-finals, both especially in Europe, but also in the FA Cup,
yeah.
was was not tremendous.
No, terrible. I mean, the FA Cup, they lose in semi-finals in 64, 65, and just look at the list, 66 and 1970.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
four semi-final losses in that, four semi-final losses in European Cup, and it's almost as if Bobby doesn't win anything, but of course he wins everything. And
right,
in '66 he wins the lot. He scoops practically everything. Okay, doesn't win the FA Cup, but or the league actually for that matter. But he does win the Ballon d'Or. He wins Footballer of the Year, and he
yeah.
wins the World Cup. And in doing so, he becomes one of only three English players who win the European Cup and the World Cup. Bobby Charlton's one, Nobby Stiles is the second. Who's the third?
Oh, now you he didn't play in the final, did he? The chap that you're thinking of, but he was
True. He
what?
didn't.
He trying to trick me.
Well, no, I
Ian,
just it's good.
Ian Callaghan.
Ian Callaghan is the right answer. That's very good. I'd forgotten that actually. I thought because I've previously thought that Nobby Stiles was the second most decorated English footballer in history, which I suppose is true. He is that. He
Right.
won the
Well,
World Cup and he won the European Cup.
mm.
Not many people do that. Did Bobby enjoy the World Cup in '66? Did he enjoy the final?
Well, this is tactically a very strange thing because important though he'd been through the tournament, in the final he wasn't the main man by any stretch of the
Not
imagination.
at all. Forgotten
And he,
figure, really,
and he
as
was
far as
given,
that's concerned.
still seems to me the very unlikely job by Sir Alf of marking Franz Beckenbauer,
I
which
really, Alf apparently says to Bobby, if you do it, we'll win the World Cup. Well, But did Alf have any evidence that Bobby could do man-to-man marking in that way?
I suppose what this is a really interesting one. I suppose what Bobby Charlton did have going for him with regard to that job is he was very fast and had incredible stamina.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
for all his talents, it still seems a strange thing to put on him. But maybe uh, Alf thought that the only England player who could basically keep up with Beckenbauer over 90 minutes, let alone, as it turned out, 120, was Charlton,
Yeah. Yeah.
who
Yeah.
he could run all day. Now, not that you'd point that out as being his greatest strength, but nevertheless, he trusted him. I think this is a really interesting thing about Charlton is that he was so integral to England's success, and yet there is a question of how much could Ramsey trust him tactically, and I think for a long time he couldn't. And the book by Duncan Hamilton, Answered Prayers, is really interesting on this, and he thinks that tactically for a long time Charlton was a problem for Ramsey. Clearly, massive talent had to play, but that he'd do his own thing. 10 minutes into a game, he'd forget his instructions. And Hamilton tells the story of England playing a friendly against Yugoslavia only about 3 weeks before the World Cup started, sort of preparation game for the World Cup,
Mm.
in which Ramsey noticed that a Yugoslavian player was on the ball, and Charlton made a move as though he was going to run towards the player, which is not what he would normally do, checked, and then ran to mark somebody, which was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Ramsey thought, right, the penny seems to have dropped. He's he's somebody now tactically I can trust. It's taken a long time to get here. Um, well, it would seem that by the time of the final, he he really did trust him because he was giving Charlton a job which seems massively counterintuitive to say you go out there and mark their main man. And the Germans did the same thing with Beckenbauer.
They did. It's
You go out,
ironic.
yeah, you go out there and mark and mark Bobby Charlton. And, you know, arguably you could have taken the two players off the pitch and say play 10 against 10 because they both, in a sense, did such a good job of of marking the other one out of the game.
No, it's true. I mean, you do wonder why, if Nobby Stiles is to mark Eusebio as happens 2 years later in the European Cup final at Wembley, '68, then why isn't, if there's a man-to-man job to be done, or indeed as Nobby Stiles had done in the semi-final of the World Cup in '66, he'd mark Eusebio out of the game.
He did, yeah.
You wonder why, but I suppose really Nobby's not going to be playing that far up the pitch, is it? It's a matter of
I
where
think
does
that's, I mean, you're right. Nobby South absolutely seems that you would think would seem the man for the job. But maybe with Eusebio, as you say, he's high up the pitch. Eusebio is very much a forward. Uh, uh, Whereas Beckenbauer would be running.
defensive midfield
It,
probably.
yeah, it's kind of a central midfielder running here, there, and everywhere. And maybe that would pull Styles out of position. Whereas he trusted Charlton with his speed and stamina to keep pace with Beckenbauer.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yes, indeed.
So
No, he did. Yeah, yeah. That's absolutely
ultimately,
right.
of course, obviously, it worked. And so you've got to say, however,
Ramsey
count
was right,
Ramsey was, yeah, as so often.
as so often. 2 years later, he's back at Wembley. There's something
Yeah,
fated about this, isn't there? Is it the year ending in eight? Is it 10 years since Munich? It almost seems destined. But it's in some way, I mean, it's a great night. It's a fabulous victory. In some ways, it's the sort of end of things, isn't it, rather than the beginning? Nothing really develops after 1968 and Wembley.
yeah.
What's the reason for that? The team seems to be pretty solid, pretty clear who's playing, and where they're
I think
playing.
it's often held up as one of the things that, in the story of George Best, Best not only won a bit like in '66, Charlton won the World Cup and was European Player of the Year. In '68, Best was part of the European Cup winning side and won European Player of the Year.
Yes.
And Best told the story later. Now, whether this was an excuse on his part, but what he saw as a beginning, we've won the European Cup and we can go on,
Yeah.
he sensed that other people saw as an end.
Mm.
And maybe that was part of the problem. You've got three people in particular, Busby as manager, and the two players who'd survived Munich in Fuchs and Charlton.
Yes.
That's it now. We've done it, and more than anything, as a team, we've won it for Busby.
Yes.
Now, it's not that United were nothing after that, but I think the following season. So in '68, they very nearly won the league as well. They just missed out to
That's right. That's right.
City. But the following season, they were nowhere near winning the
No,
league.
nowhere near.
Following season, I think they finished eighth.
They can't. He can't settle on it. 11th, I think. He can't settle on a team.
It was
I
just,
calculated today. 16 players played 10 games or more. So
I,
16 played over
yeah.
10 games. So in other words, there was plenty of chopping and changing, um, but
and
there was
and
no stability.
they the European Cup was a close run thing that year
Yeah.
because they only just went out to Milan, and if they got to the final, maybe you'd have fancied the chances because I think Milan beat Feyenoord that
Right.
year.
Interesting.
Who clearly were a good side,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
maybe gaining experience for what was to come. Maybe United would have been favourites against Feyenoord, but of course, in those days, winning the only way you got into the European Cup was by winning it or winning the league.
Yeah.
So once they'd lost that semi-final to Milan, they
Mm.
weren't in the cup the next
No, that's
season,
right.
and they wouldn't be for very many years to come.
Well, no, I think it actually, but from the moment that I wrote it down somewhere, it's something like 26 years between
Yeah,
till their next pot of any importance. So we do win a couple of FA Cups. We're coming towards the end. Charlton's career ends, of course, as far as a player is concerned, in 1973. But as a prominent international player, it's over in 1970. It struck me that Charlton left the pitch with England still leading in that famous game against Germany in
yeah.
1970. What it's odd. Ramsey doesn't make many mistakes. Taking Charlton off in that game would seem to have been one of them.
I mean, he was a great manager, but arguably the knock against Ramsey was he never quite got his head around substitutions. That's sometimes said. I don't know whether that's fair as an overall point, but you're right. England were winning 2-1. Beckenbauer, again, who'd been marking Charlton, said, "Fantastic. Bobby Charlton's off, that frees me up."
Yeah,
Now, whether there's an element, Beckenbauer and Charlton were friends,
yeah,
certainly later on. Maybe he's embellishing the story a little bit, but I think there is something in that
mm,
that Bobby Charlton going off breed Franz Beckenbauer, and Ramsey was trying to save Charlton
he
for
was.
the final.
Yeah,
Well, of course, you have to get to it first.
yeah, yeah.
And so it's hard to believe that it wasn't a mistake to take Charlton off.
Well,
And
it's a results business, isn't it? I mean, you got to if you lose, if you make those decisions and you lose, then. But the decision was there to be made. By the way, Colin Bell, I think, was the replacement, known as
yeah, I
Nijinsky.
mean,
I mean,
it's not as though it was a duffer coming on by any stretch.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think what it did do is it freed Beckenbauer up, and
Mm.
that was a critical factor. Um, would England have reached the final? Would they have beaten Italy in the semi-final?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I think it would have been very, very close. I mean, I, England possibly would have been slight favourites.
For the
Uh,
semi-final, I think so. Yes, I
yeah,
think they
yeah.
would.
I don't
Yes,
think there would be much in it, but
no,
I think they probably would have been. They probably would have been slight favourites.
and
I
that
mean,
would have brought a rematch with Brazil
yes.
in the
I
final.
mean, you could look at what kind of England had given Brazil in the group stages compared to what Italy ended up doing in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
final.
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
If you looked at it that way, England looked the better side.
they did.
Uh, that's maybe simplifying it a bit.
Yeah,
It's two very good international sides, and my thoughts it probably could have gone either way, but England certainly would have had a very good chance,
they would. They would.
and possibly slight favourites.
Carl, it's Bobby Charlton retires from international football on the plane home from Mexico, and so does his brother, of course. And so, although his career goes on for another 3 years, his glory days are behind him. Um, is he the great? He's the greatest. He's the greatest footballer since the war, isn't he? In England. Um,
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. I mean, of course, there's always going to be other candidates you can name: Finney, Banks, Moore, Greaves. Of course, there's other candidates, um, but I wouldn't argue against it being Bobby Charlton.
and he's got the gold medals galore to prove it. So,
Yeah,
and on that note, we'll say goodbye and see you next time.
goodbye,
Cheers,
Peter.
Carl. Bye bye.